You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And we will start off Tuesday bringing everybody back into another special encore edition of a Stevens and Stevens podcast here on Locked On Big Ten. And I think we should start at the very top of the list with your guy, because you are the host of Locked On Buckeyes, and Ryan Day, ranking at number 4 overall. The 3 coaches ahead of Ryan Day: Nick Saban, number 1 at Alabama. Obviously, that makes sense. Number 2, Dabo Swinney at Clemson. Number 3, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. But number 4 for Ryan Day, I think that's pretty fair. Jay, what were your thoughts on where he fell in those rankings?
Fair, a good word to use, Ben. You look at Nick Saban, you look at the totality or the history of college football, he's going to be in your top 2, top 3 as far as college football coaches of all time. It was a guy, the coach at the same school he's at now, formerly in Bear Bryant, who some will say he should be up there. You got a guy in Tom Osborne, formerly at Nebraska. He should be up there. Will you get one of the coaches at Miami? I don't think so, because even though they were good, some won national championships, the longevity that Bear Bryant and Nick Saban had, those coaches at the University of Miami down in Florida didn't have. Will you go all the way back to a guy named Knute Rockne? I know nothing about him except for he won, but historians say he should be in the list as well. It's going to be very hard to not have Saban in that top 3. If you want to say top 5, okay, cool, I understand it, but Saban is one of those guys that you cannot deny how successful he has been.
Right.
2, 3, 4, 5. This is where it gets interesting. Number 2, Dabo Swinney, one of the few guys in the top 10 that has won a national championship. I think he's actually, let me see, Saban's won at his own school, Swinney at his own school, and they're the only 2 in the top 10 that have won a championship at their school. Jimbo Fisher won one at Florida State, not at Texas A&M for the Aggies. So Lincoln Riley, I think the one reason why he's above Ryan Day is because of longevity at the school he is currently at. If you give Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day their first 2 years at their school, or you go this year and next year, or last year and this year, or the only 2 years that Ryan Day was there, I think you would probably put Day ahead of Riley because of postseason moving forward. But I think just the longevity, they did reward longevity in being successful, which is why I do believe he is there. Mac Brown at being at 12, I think the longevity of him being a college football coach is part of the reason he's in the top 12. One way for Ryan Day to move up in this rankings, and honestly, I think I said it earlier on Monday, Ben, Brian Kelly at 5. If Brian Kelly wins a playoff game, he has a good argument to be 4 and Day being 5. I don't mind either way, because I think when you're in the top 10, top 5, you're a really good coach. You're kind of splitting hairs. But one way for Ryan Day, I think, to move up, even if he doesn't win a national championship in this upcoming season, run the table once again, win the playoff. Yeah. There's no way you can say that he's not with this being a year-by-year thing. There is no way I think you can say that Riley is ahead of Day unless they both run the table, they both win their playoff, and they meet in the national championship, and Riley beats Day. That is very likely. I'm not saying it's not. That's very possible. Yeah. But I do think right now, Ryan Day, first 2 years as the head coach at any level, first 2 years, he hasn't been in college football very long. For him to do what he has done at Ohio State, from what Jim Tressel did to what Urban Meyer did and to what Day has done so far, it's amazing to see the success and that he, in the first couple of years, didn't get a ring like Tressel and Meyer did. Not saying he won't get one eventually, because I do think Ryan Day will eventually get a national championship. But 1 through 5, this rankings, I don't think you're going to have a good enough argument to move Day a little bit higher, or to drop him down to, say, 6, 7, or 8. I think he's solidified in that top 5 in college football coaches in the entire country.
I completely agree with you. I would have him somewhere in the top 5. Being at number 4, battling with Lincoln Riley for that 3 spot, I think is absolutely fair. And I think you look at Ohio State and the program that Ryan Day overtook and came into after Urban Meyer's time there. I think you look at that and you're like, yeah, this makes sense that he is continuing to do that. But there has been no drop-off. And in ways, I think Ryan Day is doing better things for Ohio State than even Urban Meyer did. And yes, we need to see some of the success in winning a national championship, because that is the level Ohio State puts themselves on each and every year. Big Ten championships are great, but they have enough of them in Columbus, Ohio. They want to get back and win the whole darn thing, but they are a fixture, obviously, in the college football playoff. They are going to continue to be that. They recruit with the best of them across the entire country. Ohio State is on the level of Alabama and Clemson in my mind, and Ryan Day gets to have some kudos to make sure that success has been the flatline level since he overtook the program from Urban Meyer, because you are in that situation. How do you keep it running? And I think Ryan Day has done great things with it and has even got it to a really, really solid place. Maybe, like I said, doing things better than what Urban Meyer did as well. I also think Ryan Day is one of the brightest offensive minds in college football. And at times, because he's the head coach of Ohio State, I think that's slightly overlooked. I think some of the game plans and the schematic things that he has done for that Buckeye offense makes them so dynamic. And obviously, he had a huge part of that in Urban Meyer's tenure. But I think Ryan Day, even now, with the game planning and what he can do, you saw it in that game against Clemson, one of the most vaunted defenses in all of the country last year. In the Sugar Bowl, Ryan Day, I think, outcoached Dabo Swinney from an offensive perspective, but that's what Ryan Day does. So I think having him at number 4 makes a ton of sense. Another guy in the top 25, the last guy we really haven't discussed on these Stevens and Stevens shows over these past 2 days, is James Franklin, number 13 overall, the head coach, of course, for Penn State. I thought having it at number 13 was also pretty fair. I think that's a good spot to have James Franklin inside the top 15. I think he could make a case for being a top 10 head coach at times. You have to take into consideration what happened in 2020, a historically bad start for Penn State, going 0-5, but then winning 4 straight games to round out 2020, now with optimism building once again for 2021, a Penn State team that will be competing for that second spot in the Big Ten East once again. What did you make of where CBS Sports ranked James Franklin?
I thought it was very fitting, and it made a lot of sense as far as what Penn State is as a program and to where he currently is as a coach. I don't think James Franklin deserves to be, or he has earned the right to be in the top 5, top 8, top 10 as far as coaches, not just getting the wins, but the Patty Fitzgerald mindset of, I'm going to create a culture, build a culture, make things so people want to come here and nowhere else so they can have a chance to not just play good college football, but also be very, very good and possibly at the very next level. But Ben, I went to go pull up some stuff, and this is coming from sportsreference.com, and it's very telling the kind of coach I think we're fighting that James Franklin is. When he was at Vanderbilt for 3 years there, he won 9 wins twice, 9-4 in 2012, 9-4 in 2013. He went to Penn State. He has 3 11-win seasons, 16, 17, and also 2019. But he's really going to be kind of that coach. It's maybe kind of startling to people to say this, but he might be a guy that's more of your Kirk Ferentz or Paul Chryst, very solid, 3 11-win seasons. That might be the outlier. But he's going to be a guy, 7, 8, 9, kind of his sweet spot, 10 or 11 is a really good season. And I think you're going to find that with Mack Brown and North Carolina. Not your typical football school. They could get talent, but not normally your school that you're going to, not your school, you're going to say, ooh, that's a football power, football factory. I want to go there. Penn State is supposed to be that school, but it's very, 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 very hard to rebuild what Joe Pa did there in Penn State now that he's no longer there. I do think James Franklin is a good coach, but the 8, 9, I'll erase 7, even though he has a couple 7-win seasons there at Penn State. The 8, 9, maybe 10 mark. The 10 mark and the 11 mark is kind of his sweet spot. I think he's more of an 8, 9 win guy. Penn State fans won't like that, but that's what you got. And honestly, I'd rather have James Franklin right now than any of the other options that are there. I got a little Scott Frost stuff I wanted to mention. Do you got time for that, Ben?
Oh, I was going to go to that next. I was going to say we touched on the 8 coaches in the top 25, and then let's talk about the 6 coaches from the Big Ten Conference that find themselves in the latter half of CBS Sports rankings. But I want to touch on something you said about James Franklin because heading into 2020, he had 3 11-win seasons in the past 4 years, and then 2020 was not a great start for Penn State. It did not go well, but now they have a new offensive coordinator in Mike Yurcich taking over for Kirk Ciarrocca. They build off ending the season on a high note that they did last year, and I think that speaks to the culture that James Franklin has created in State College, and I think it is a culture of winning success on a yearly basis. I expect Penn State to win 9 or 10 games each and every year. Can they take that next leap for this program and be a consistent New Year's Six bowl team? For sure. Can they take the next leap in this program to be over Ohio State, getting to the Big Ten title game? that is where the skepticism might be, at least at this moment. But I think they are more along the lines of an Ohio State than any other team in the Big Ten Conference at this moment in the Big Ten East. So I think James Franklin has done a terrific job in Happy Valley and will continue to do so. So, Jay, you transitioned me very well into it. 8 coaches in the CBS Sports rankings in their top 25. Now let's focus on some of the coaches that find themselves ranked from 26 to 65. We had Greg Schiano from Rutgers at 34, Brett Bielema, the new head man in Champaign, Illinois, for those Illinois Fighting Illini, at number 42 overall, Scott Frost at number 47, number 53 out of Purdue, Jeff Brom, number 57, Mel Tucker from Michigan State, and number 61, rounding out the crop from the Big Ten Conference, Mike Locksley of Maryland. You wanted to focus on Scott Frost at number 47. What are your thoughts there, Jay Stevens?
Scott Frost is going to get a very long leash, maybe longer than some may think. I know Nebraska wants to go back and do the success and to duplicate or replicate the success they used to have. I think one thing knocking Nebraska is moving from the Big 12 to the Big 10. Imagine if Scott Frost was able to only recruit those players, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Tennessee, that section of the country, like they used to. I think Scott Frost's job would be very secure. I think they would be a lot more successful than they've had. But when they joined the Big Ten, they ran from the Big 12, joined the Big Ten, and the Big Ten said, "Hey, how about we stretch out our footprint? It's going to help us." Okay, great. In the grand scheme of things, yes, it may help you to touch more parts of the country. But for Nebraska recruiting, I think it really hurt them. And Scott Frost, with him being a former player there at Nebraska, let's say 94 maybe, 95, 93, 93 to 97, didn't play in 95. I think him playing there and him being there when they were very, very successful. Shortly after he was no longer coaching there, they did get to the national championship. Behind Heisman Trophy winner Eric Crouch, he sees all that. And just how I am, I get nostalgic. I'm sure, Ben, you do as well. The success we've had in our younger years, we try to do that again in maybe different ways to try to be very, very successful. Maybe media, maybe a podcast, whatever it is, you try to do that. And I do believe Scott Frost is trying to go back to the old days, but he's having a hard time via the recruiting. And I also think that Scott Frost maybe just you're getting what you're going to get. Yeah, he had an undefeated season at UCF in 2017, but outside of that, he has no above 500 seasons at all. He had literally been 1 year of success, 2 bowl appearances at Cure Bowl in 2016. They lost that. And then they won the Peach Bowl in 2017. Outside of that, 4-8, 5-7, 3-5. Nothing Scott Frost has done, even at his previous stop, has really said he deserves to get a long leash. I do believe his playing career will prolong that. This year and next year, it's really going to help and see if Nebraska should hold on to him or let him go. Number 47, I get it. I don't like to split hairs. Once you get outside the top 25, top 30, top 40, I'm not splitting hairs because everybody has stuff to work on. The next guy on my mind is actually the guy right behind Scott Frost. All these rankings, there's Jeff Brom. Don't want to get there just yet because I know, Ben, you probably have a couple things to say.
About Scott Frost, indeed I do, because I was working in Omaha, Nebraska when Scott Frost was hired as the Nebraska football coach. And I have said from that time, I continue to say now, if it's not Scott Frost to turn things around for this Nebraska football program, then I'm not sure who it's going to be. He's the prodigal son returned back to his native Nebraska. He was the quarterback under Tom Osborne the last time Nebraska won a national championship in 1997. He understands what it takes to win at Nebraska. I think he is moving that program in a better direction from where it was under Mike Riley, maybe even at the end of the Bo Pelini era, although Bo Pelini was winning a lot of games, just not the big games that really mattered to Nebraska. I think you bring up a very interesting point, though, about where the Huskers find themselves in the Big Ten Conference. And we saw this rear its ugly head a lot during the 2020 Big Ten football season when Nebraska tried to schedule a non-conference game against Chattanooga and had some rift with the Big Ten Conference, if you will. Nebraska in the 80s and 90s was the big dog in the Big 8 at the time that then became the Big 12. Yes. They were the be-all, end-all. Texas, obviously, and Oklahoma were a part of that as well. But Nebraska got to call some shots. Then when they joined the Big Ten Conference in the 2014-2015 season, they became a smaller fish in a bigger pond because the Big Ten has its storied programs like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, all of that good stuff. Well, mainly Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, a little bit of a later add as well. But Nebraska became a smaller fish in a bigger pond in the Big Ten Conference, and they do that for revenue and TV money and all of that good stuff. I think they saw some writing on the wall with the Big 12 not being able to generate all of that positive outcome that you would want. So Nebraska joins the Big Ten Conference for that revenue, but they do not call the shots anymore in the Big Ten Conference. They are the new kids on the block in the Big Ten Conference. So, well, actually, Nebraska joined in 2010, excuse me. But anyway, going back to where Nebraska is, they still one of the newer kids on the block here, and they do not get to run things they might like the way they might have in the Big 12. So I think at times that takes a little bit of a transition for Nebraska in their fan base, in their heads. However, I do believe that right now in 2021, Scott Frost in his first 3 years, 12-20 during his time at Nebraska. 2021 is going to be a crucial year for Scott Frost's time at the helm of the Huskers. They need to win. They need to get to 6 wins. They need to get to a bowl game, in my opinion. Scott has talked a lot about the positive direction of this program, but what they need to see now is not just talk. They need to see the results in the win column. It is a daunting schedule for Nebraska in 2021, but I still think bowl eligibility should be the relative level of expectation for Nebraska this year. And if they can do it, Scott Frost has secured his job for a while. I don't actually believe he's on the super hot seat where his job might be vacant at the end of this year, just based on logistics, contract things, whatever it might be. But the seat would be very, very warm heading into next season. I do think, though, that Scott Frost can have success at Nebraska. And again, if it's not him, I'm not entirely sure who you bring in to try to flip this thing for Nebraska. There are a couple of guys later in the bottom half of the Big Ten Conference in 26 through 65 I want to touch on. And then, Jay, I think we close with your thoughts on Jeff Brom. But I thought it was interesting where Brett Bielema finds himself, having not coached a game in the Big Ten Conference in quite some time. Obviously, 3 Big Ten titles during his time at Wisconsin. But that was the historical reference that I think brought Brett Bielema, Bert, as we endearingly call him, to number 42. I also think Greg Schiano at number 34 goes to speak about the direction he has Rutgers heading and some of the things that he is doing on the recruiting trail, getting the top overall recruit in the state of New Jersey to commit to Rutgers late last week. So at number 34, when you have a Rutgers team that went 3-21 in 2018 and 2019, 3 wins, and then in the compacted and weird 2020 Big Ten football season, Greg Schiano also gets 3 wins. That is pretty outstanding stuff, and I think Rutgers is on the up and up in the Big Ten Conference. So, Jay, we have talked a lot of Big Ten coaches here throughout these 2 days of the Stevens and Stevens episodes. Let's finish with Jeff Brom out of Purdue, because he is one of the more interesting coaches right now of where he stands in the Big Ten Conference and the level of success he has not really been able to replicate from his first couple of years at Purdue to now where they find themselves entering 2021.
Jeff Brom was a guy that, just like I said earlier, if you would have told me 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the whole Jim Harbaugh, David Shaw kind of connection, if you would have asked me when Jeff Brom got hired at Purdue, if Jeff Brom would be in the bottom portion of not just the Big Ten coach rankings, but the entire Power 5 rankings put out by CBS Sports, I would have said, you're crazy. You're insane. I understand the hard time that he's going to have via the recruiting trail. I understand how many most of the top players in the state you live in, maybe even the city you coach in, will go to somewhere else, maybe even outside the state, to play the football. Because if I'm a 4-star or 5-star player in the state of Indiana, you're going to get looks from all Big Ten schools. And Purdue is okay. It's Purdue. I mean, it's okay. I mean, they got Matt Painter in basketball, but football really hasn't done much. I mean, they have some good players, but nothing really that says wow and eye-popping and appeal that I want to go there. Mm-hmm. Jeff Brom, it seems like you may say he's a little off, but if we go vanilla, look at records since he's got to Purdue. Not going to Western Kentucky, but since he's got to Purdue. 1-2 in bowl games. The only win came his first year, 2017. That was a Foster Farms Bowl. I have to keep reading these things. There's so many bowl games now. I got to make sure that I say it correctly. Mm-hmm. But he hasn't won more than 7 or more games since his first year. Yeah. 7-6 and 6-7, 4-8, and 2-4. When you're on that downward slope, that downward trajectory, you just keep getting worse and worse and worse. Now, last year was different. I understand it. Condensed season, only played 6 games. You're thinking of hoping at least go 3-3. At least be somebody that can go 3-3, but no, the 2-4. Jeff Brom, I don't like calling for some people's jobs, but I hope right now Jeff Brom is having like a meeting with himself saying, look, what am I doing? Am I hiring the wrong coaches? Is it my philosophy? Do I need to delegate more like some of the elite coaches do? Okay, cool. That's not in the budget. Well, what can I do to be successful? Because something I'm doing right now is not breeding success in the football program. Jeff Brom, I think he can be good. But just as we've seen with Nick Saban, not putting him on the same level, but Nick Saban went to the NFL, didn't work, went back to college where he's successful. Maybe this is kind of like that Miami thing for Nick Saban. You go somewhere, doesn't work out, go somewhere else, go to the next job that wants you, and have success there. I know people will say, Jay, he's not Saban. I know he's not Saban. He can use that same little mindset Saban used after leaving the Miami Dolphins. Brom, leave Purdue, go somewhere else. I think he can be a good coach. I just don't know if this is the right spot for him right now.
Yeah, Jeff Brom, I think 3 years ago, had they released these rankings following Jeff Brom's second year in West Lafayette, I think he probably would have been trying to crack the top 25 and all the optimism that was behind that Boilermaker football program. Where it stands now, just 5-10 in the Big Ten Conference in the last 2 years, that's not going to get the job done. I know that's not where Jeff Brom wants his team to be. So they have an look for 2021 to try to take that next step, because I agree, in that mush of the Big Ten West where you have programs like Purdue, like Nebraska, like Minnesota at the moment, even Northwestern maybe on a year-to-year basis, when you're trying to get up to the top of that conference, you need to take steps against all these other programs. Jeff Brom and Purdue in that moment as well. Like we mentioned, Mel Tucker at number 57 and Mike Locksley at number 61. I think those are both fair right now. Mike Locksley 5-12 in his time at Maryland. He was terrible for New Mexico. I think he's turning things in the right direction for that Terps program. A lot of talent, and he's recruiting really, really well in College Park. Mel Tucker, obviously, with one of the strangest job opportunities last year, taking over in the middle of February before the COVID-19 pandemic shut everything down. But I again agree with where Mel Tucker is bringing the Spartans in East Lansing. So Jay, a lot of coaches talk over these past 2 episodes here on the Stevens and Stevens podcast, but that's how you slice it when you're looking ahead to the 2021 college football season, especially this early on now in the later parts of May. You need to talk teams, you need to talk players to know, and also coaches in the direction they are bringing their program. So Jay Stevens, for these past 2 days, it has been an absolute pleasure. Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes, my right-hand man on both Monday and Tuesdays, Stevens and Stevens podcasts.
This is fun, Ben. A lot of fun. The Big Ten coaches being ranked by CBS Sports. I got to thank them, their writers, for putting this together, because it makes our job enjoyable. You and I get to talk about a list that has a lot of good stuff inside of it. Ranking them, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? How can these coaches move up? This is the kind of stuff we enjoy this time of year. I'm just wondering, when they do a basketball list, where will coaches like Chris Holtmann and Matt Painter fall in that list, my friend?
I would think they might be up there, especially Matt Painter for what he has done. But that is a conversation maybe for another day. We focus on football for right now. Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes. Again, I thank you very much for your time.